Our next one, we have our first MVP question of the mailbag. It comes from
Oh yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait. I can't wait. Guys, keep that same energy. Let's go.
Keep that same energy. It's more of a statement than a question, but from Shakir, he says, regarding MVP voting, if the Nuggets drop to the 7th seed and finish with under 50 wins, how can people still vote for him over Giannis and Embiid, two players who will finish the season as the best players on top 3 seeded teams in the East? A large part of modern day MVP voting is team success, and in the last 20 years, only one player has won MVP without reaching 50 wins. That's Russell Westbrook. It wouldn't sit right with me if Jokic won, despite the phenomenal statistical season he's having and the overall impact he has on the team. I feel it. Like, I get it.
Yeah, I'm not mad at this take. Sorry, go ahead.
Steve is already laughing. Like, I understand being like, if Jokic finishes for like 48, Jokic, like he's his own team. But like if Jokic finishes with 48 wins or something, 47, 48 wins, and you have Giannis and Embiid in the low mid 50s, then I could understand looking like, okay, winning is supposed to matter. The Nuggets are in the play-in. What are we doing here? I think that ignores a little bit of context just because he's been so dominant himself and the circumstances around his team being in 7 right now. And that's a recent development with Minnesota now being like the best team in the West since the All-Star break.
It's also worth noting that the Nuggets are only 2 wins behind the Bucks and the Sixers.
Yeah, like there isn't a large gap there. And so I struggle to go straight with Milwaukee, Philly 2 and 3, Denver 7, therefore Jokic eliminated. Like, I'm not opposed to someone giving MVP to Giannis or Embiid, but I would like a slightly better reason than that, considering the roster context for everyone.
Yeah. I think the devil's advocate take here, just like the fact that he won it last year would be like, don't we need a little bit of extra justification to give it to him back to back?
Yeah, I can see
that's the one right there.
Yeah, I guess the primary case for that would just be like he's been better than he was last year.
That's a fair point. He's been significantly better. I honestly just, I'm very conflicted about MVP voting this year. I don't really know what I'm gonna do. But I tend to lean towards Giannis. Because Jokic has improved defensively this year, but I mean, Giannis is a force, and the Bucks are worse defensively, but he's also been asked to make up for a lot. And I don't know, like the only reason he's not having like career statistical highs is because he's not playing a lot of minutes, which is the absolute smartest thing to do, because why the hell would you? And they've had a ton of injuries this year too.
And he's still slapping up 30, 12, and 6. And he's in the mix for the Defensive Player of the Year this year. Like it's wild what Giannis has been able to do. Steve, did you want to jump in, good sir?
I was just curious because you mentioned some points as far as that shouldn't dock him. What if that's a tiebreaker to some folks? Like maybe they say, hey, Jokic has the stats. Giannis has been incredible on both ends. Embiid's been a monster. What if it just comes down to, I don't know how to pick, and that record ends up being the tiebreaker? How do you feel about that?
Sure.
Like, I get it. Like, my thing is, if that's the tiebreaker, sure. If that's just, all right, we knocking you out because your team is finishing here, MVPs don't finish here, you're done, while ignoring what Jokic has done and what Jokic has done with his context. Like, that feels weird to me. Like, even with the Westbrook example being brought up, like, I think Jokic has been better than Westbrook was during the MVP season.
Oh, he's much better than Westbrook was during the MVP season.
So, like, I'm not sure how much I get it. Again, I just need a little bit more than that. Like, I feel like this has to be a Embiid / Giannis have been better than Jokic in this area versus team didn't win when Jokic has been missing number 2 and number 3 all year.
They've interestingly all had similar sort of plot lines too, where they've kind of had to deal with a lot. Like Embiid's got definitely the most talent on his team, but he also, the team was going through the Ben Simmons situation. I don't know if that's necessarily like, hey, like Embiid should be the MVP because of that, but he did also carry them through some games that, you know, if he wasn't as good as he was, like maybe the Sixers are in a lower leverage position come trade deadline and don't get Harden. Like that could factor into it. But they've all just like, you know, just been dealing with a lot of. I think Giannis probably doesn't get enough credit for dealing for the Bucks injuries or like the Bucks in general. Like that's just not been part of the plot for some reason. Like we talk about like the Bucks defense not being as good this year, and just a general drop off. And we talk about Giannis, and we just don't talk about the fact that Drew and Middleton missed a bunch of games. And when all those guys are healthy, they're still really good,
dominant,
like just as good, not if not better than they were last year. Like even like the Lopez stuff, like you know, Portis has just become him. It's fine. It's fine.
See, I needed Giannis to take off because I can't stand doing Jokic versus Embiid. It's my least favorite basketball conversation in the world because they're both insane. They're both great at different things.
Yeah,
and it's like I don't necessarily want to choose. Because, I mean, Joel Embiid averaged 30 for, 2 straight months? But that's not an easy feat. And Jokic is number one in, every Nekias in the world?
Is that what we're calling it?
Yes, all the time. Now, side note, they got to stop with that on national TV. Don't put up the screenshot of all the advanced categories that he's leading in. Not at least when that's the first thing you do. Like, Jokic is a bucket getter. Display that to people, please. Like, this is a guy who will walk to the post very casually, face up, look you dead in the eye, and then shoot right over you.
No, but his touch time, though.
But no,
I also talk about his touch time a lot. This is just a joke directed against myself.
But no, I'm glad you made that point because I feel like part of the Jokic discourse and how wonky it is that for people that don't watch him regularly, the advanced numbers seem to be the easy introduction to folks. And not everyone is willing to go there with advanced numbers right now. So you're already like not meeting people where they are.
I feel like the best comp for those guys is to say like Joel is like the Kobe of playing the 5, and Jokic is like the Curry. Like you'll both unstoppable. You'll take either of them, but very distinctly different play styles that lend themselves to like different systems as well.
I like that. Wait a minute, you might have did something.
Oh yeah, it was done.
It was done.
It was done.
That ain't bad. That ain't bad at all.
Now, Nekias, you want to talk about your 4th, 5th MVP voting? You want to talk about your distraction and disdain for the MVP having 5 players on it?
I don't have a general disdain.
Let's talk awards, but this is the framing.
Like, I guess my thing is like, why are we up in arms about it? Like, my general thing with award talk is like, talk to me if the player that you want to talk about has a case to win the award. And so like, that's my personal baseline for having like deep conversation about it. Other than that, it's just like, okay, cool. Devin Booker is really good at basketball. I knew that already. If you're framing it into a conversation, like I don't think Devin Booker has a case for number 1. And so if you bring up Devin Booker within the framework of Devin Booker should win MVP, and then I say no, then the conversation is inherently negative. And
should win MVP or get MVP love, 2 different things.
But that leads me to what is MVP love?
Or should they be in the MVP conversation? That's another way we like to put it.
Yeah,
or the conversation before the conversation.
Right, like my conversation is who should win. That's what I want to talk about in this case, and that's why for me the conversation has been dominated by Jokic and Embiid, by Giannis. You know, Steph early on this year. that's, we talked about this on the pod earlier this year. That's kind of where the DeRozan stuff was starting to bug me a little bit. I'm just like, we can talk about how great he's been this season, the scoring bench that he's on, what he's doing with the Chicago team that I've been very wrong about, without being, hey, he should win MVP. I'm just like, no, I don't think that's true, but that's okay.
I think this is just, more than anything, it's just a failure of finding creative ways to say somebody's having a really good season. Because, like, if you say someone's having an all-star season, then it's like, well, yeah, but that's not really what we're trying to demonstrate when we're talking about, like, the tear that DeMar was on, or Devin Booker. But he does, like, yeah, he's not in that top three. Nobody else is, right? But we also don't necessarily say, like, hey, he's a first-team All-NBA. Like, that just, doesn't really roll off the tongue. It's just, I think it's just a way that we talk about things, especially in March, right? Like, because we already know, we're like, at this point, like, we already know, like we've had the MVP conversation for, like, the latter half of the season. It's either one of those three guys. Nobody's mad if you pick any of those three. We got to talk about something else. We got to find a way to talk about something else. So, hey, this guy, could he sneak into the conversation? Could he punch his way up into the conversation before the conversation? It's just what we do.
I guess that's just kind of where I'm like, we don't have to do this. Like,
we do, though, because it's March 24th and there's 3 weeks until the playoffs. So we have to do it, guys. That's how it goes.
I get it. I'm just like, talk about these guys all year, and we don't have to try to force them into MVP conversations to give them love.
No, we could do that. We could try that instead. Maybe next year.
I'm going to counter, Nekias.
Okay.
What's wrong with recognizing folks for having a good year? So you say your conversation is, hey, who's winning? I get that. What's wrong with nominating 4 and 5? Like, Gary Payton got MVP votes during the MJ years. That's a thing that happened. Was he the MVP? Probably not. But someone was like, hey, MJ's going to win. Let me recognize somebody else. Is that inherently bad? I'm curious.
Inherently, like...
Inherently bad. I like that we're just delving into philosophy here.
Yeah, this is beautiful.
Yeah. Is anything inherently bad? I'm more of, like, utilitarian myself.
Now we're getting into the deep stuff. So, like, I
cold breakfast.
You got it. So when you say Gary Payton got MVP vote, did he actually get first place votes, or was he like in the?
Yes. Yes, he did.
You got a first place vote?
1998.
No,
okay, see, like, yes, that's inherently bad to me, because I don't think, as great as Gary Payton was, last guard to win Defensive Player of the Year, all that good stuff, Sonics to the finals, cool. I don't think Gary Payton was Gary Payton better than MJ? Was Gary Payton a legitimate, he should win the MVP guy? I don't like, as a concept, and I've talked about this on my timeline, I think I've talked about this on the podcast too, like, in general, I do not like casting he deserves recognition votes. This always bugs me once we get into, like, all NBA teams specifically, where it's just like, hey, this guy's been really good, and it's like, all right, cool. Has he been a top 6 guard? Has he been a top 6 forward? Has he been a top 3 center? No. What are we talking about? And, like, that sounds a lot harsher than I mean it, but, like, that's just kind of how I think about award races.
No, it's like we were talking about before the show. Like, I thought this was gonna be a very spicy conversation, but you just said, like, he just isn't in the top 3, and I was like, that's not mean. It just sounds mean, but it's fine. It's just true. he's still Devin Booker at the end of the day.
Right. So, like, with the Gary Payton thing, it's just like, you can talk about, write about, acknowledge how great Gary Payton was during that season without saying, hey, Gary should win MVP, because the answer is no, he shouldn't. Like, that's not what the spirit of the vote should be for, in my opinion. Like, maybe that's just me being rigid or being literal, but, like, that's me.
But I feel like they're two different things. So I don't feel like it hurts the spirit of the vote, to me. I like the MVP discussion, so I'll come right there. Okay. My favorite is going throughout the year and going from 10 to 8 to 5 to, maybe someone else shuffled back in. Like, for me, I've had some pretty consistent names, but Steph Curry dropped out. And now I'm thinking, does Kevin Durant go back into my top 5? DeMar's been in. Ja's been in the whole time. What about Devin Booker? Does he go into my top 5? Does DeMar face DeRozan? Like, I have fun with that conversation. Doesn't mean they're going to win MVP. And when these guys get that recognition of a top 5 MVP type deal, that's something that like sticks. Like, you can Google that Tim Hardaway was 6th in 1998 in the MVP voting. It's a
Joakim
thing.
Noah came in 5th.
See, like,
I think it was 2016, right? 2015.
It's a badge of honor. It's pride. It's recognition. It's acknowledging you had a great year. So while it may not impact the overall MVP vote, I think it's a neat discussion to have, even if it's a sub discussion underneath the top 3. I don't want to dismiss the great season. Hey, he was great. Salute to you.
Here's a question though. Like, is there not like a fundamental flaw in the MVP, award at this point anyways? Like, if I was a player that wanted to win a championship, I'd be running in the other direction from the MVP award, because if you win the MVP, you're just not going to win a championship. That's just kind of how it goes unless you're Steph Curry, at least in like the last 20 years. Like, there's very few players, I think it's like 5 in the last like 22 years or 23 years that have won the MVP and then won a championship, because like the award has now become all about dependency. Like is there maybe we should be having this discussion a different way, where like you do look at a player like Devin Booker and say like, wait, should he be in the MVP discussion because the Suns are the number 1 seed and he's the only guy on that team that, if he's out for, like, you've lost Chris Paul for a chunk of the season, lost Ayton for a chunk of the season, found a way to spell those guys. I don't think you can necessarily do that with Booker, and he's the best player on that team. He's their closer, and he's still putting up incredible numbers. Like, I think he's just like doing his regular 26, 5 and 5 thing, like he always does, and like, I don't know, like that they're the 1 seed by a mile. They're the best team in the NBA. They're like the team that I have the most faith in going into the playoffs. And like, what, just because they're well balanced, like they should, like the individuals on that team shouldn't get recognition?
Oh, was that the end? I didn't want to cut you off.
No, that's it. Yeah, that's all I had.
Oh, okay. Like I hear you, especially in light of Phoenix being as good as they are. Like, I don't think it's fair for him to be docked for Phoenix being really good, because like there was like a stretch early in the year where he missed some games and like Paul Lake were able to keep it going, and then we just saw what Booker did without Paul. He was able to keep it going. I guess this is why, like earlier today, like I asked people like, okay, what exactly is your MVP criteria? Because I feel like that's where a lot of the conversation kind of goes left too. Because once you have the discussion about Booker's like, hey, why is he not in it? It's like, well, people told us that you had to do this, this, and this. And now that he's doing this and this, now it feels like the goalposts have been moved. And it's just like, I'm not sure there's maybe been like a skeleton of what the MVP criteria is, but like there's never been like a firm set, you have to do these 3 things in order to win MVP.
That's kind of the fun of it, no?
Like, I guess it depends on what side you fall on it. Like, I think with Booker in particular, I feel like a lot of the frustration from Suns fans or just Booker fans in general is that his narrative arc has not been fair. Like, he came into the league, as you saw him in Kentucky, like he was an off-ball guy, shooter. He gets thrust into an on-ball role, looks better than expected. He's basically playing point guard for them with an awful cast, with management being bad. He's putting up numbers, but he's not winning. So like, he gets dubbed as the empty calories guy. And then you see what they do in the bubble when they actually have a solid point guard in Ricky Rubio. And then Chris Paul comes and Devin Booker is still good. And then it's, well, now the Suns are good because of Chris Paul, which was not fair. And now the Suns are doing this and Devin Booker is still good. And then it's Devin Booker is still not the MVP, which I don't think he is, but I can also understand where that frustration comes in, where it's like, okay, for Devin Booker specifically, what else does he have to do to get recognition for how good he is?
That's the fun though. like I like hearing different cases for different players, even if they're not necessarily for the MVP. Like I don't think I would say Devin Booker should be the MVP. But if you want to say Devin Booker should be up there, I would understand it. I get it.
In the conversation.
Yeah, in the conversation, as we
We
like
come
to
full
say.
circle.
Full circle. It's what we do. I don't like groupthink. So I like that different people have different criterias. And if you have an argument that makes sense, I get it. Like, let's talk about it. I hear you. I think that's fun. I, as a 12, 13-year-old, was team Tracy McGrady should be the MVP all the time in Orlando. Because what do they do without him? My dad looked at me like I was dumb. But he listened to me. He listened to me. He let me make my argument, and then he told me, yeah, but. And I was like, okay, that makes sense, but still, he's the most valuable. Like that should be the fun of the topic if we actually have the conversations. But once it becomes like it goes left and into, well, this happened, so it like no, appreciate all the greatness. Make your case for your player that you think you believe in.
Yeah.
Someone may disagree, but that's the beauty of it. Instead of Chris Paul's leadership is number one in MVP voting.
That might be the only MVP conversation I don't like.
The Paul stuff is like, you know how upset I was last year when I had to take the anti-Paul stance? You know how annoyed that made me specifically.
When did you take the anti-Paul stance?
Oh, don't do this. The pod is out there. The tweets are out there. The pod is out there. Absolutely not. We're not.
Check the transcripts real quick.
We are not. Absolutely not. We are not doing this. We got a video clip out there for a promo clip and everything. No, I was very much because Chris Paul was like one of 16 players that people tried to push last year as the MVP over Jokic. No.
See, no, to the Spo and Heat point, you know, like I think that if I wasn't a regular listener of this podcast, I'd be a little bit worried right now. But this is just how you guys talk, so it's all good.
Like, oh man, MVP talk always gets me riled up. This is all right.